As this year's election comes into focus, what role will religion play in presidential politics and other races around the country? To discuss, we're joined by two leading Catholic voices. Fran Maier is a senior fellow in the Catholic Studies program at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. His work focuses on the intersection of Christian faith, culture, and public life. His most recent book, released earlier this year, is True Confessions: Voices of Faith from a Life in the Church. And Kenneth Craycraft is a professor of moral theology at Mount St. Mary's Seminary and School of Theology in Cincinnati, Ohio. His expertise is the intersection of politics and religion. His newly released book is Citizens Yet Strangers: Living Authentically Catholic in a Divided America. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you both for joining us for this important conversation. Fran, let's start with you. You've navigated political moments from within the chancery as the right hand to Archbishop Chaput for years, a Catholic leader who has never shied away from political engagement. How should Catholics frame their engagement in politics?
Well, I think every Catholic has an obligation to consult his or her conscience and follow what the conscience tells that person to do. But the point where people get confused is that the conscience isn't some sort of free-floating opinion machine. It has to be formed properly in the Christian faith. Once you do that and consult it seriously and try to conform your life to what the Church teaches and understand why she teaches what she teaches, then you're free to make your decision. And it can be a difficult decision, particularly in a year like this where, in my opinion, both of the candidates are political embarrassments, moral embarrassments. And so it's very, very difficult to say, hey, you have to vote this way, because people finally have to do the calculus in their own souls. But you can't just do that because you have a strong opinion. You have to form your mind and your heart in line with what the Church believes about the human person and the human person's dignity. Our first loyalty is to our heavenly citizenship, not to our identity as Americans. We're Catholics first. That has to guide everything that we do. And so, for example, in our family, there's simply no way we're going to vote for President Biden. No way. The reason for that is we have a son with Down syndrome, and we have 3 of our grandchildren who have special needs. And under the regime that's emerging in this country, none of them would have made it because they would have been aborted by most people. Now, whether that translates into voting for another candidate, particularly Trump, that's another matter entirely. And that's an issue that we just simply haven't thought through and decided yet. But we don't support people who kill unborn children, because that's always grievously wrong. And it's astonishing that a president who takes some pride in his Catholic identity would be so obviously out of sync with what Christians have always believed about the dignity of life.
Well, we're going to get into a little bit more of President Biden's faith in a second. But Ken, your new book, Citizens Yet Strangers, speaks to this necessary prophetic distance for Catholics with politics. How is that possible then in today's extreme climate with these limited choices that Fran just described?
Well, first of all, I like that phrase very much, the prophetic distance, and I wish I'd used that in my book, because I think it's it's a good way to describe what I tried to do in the book. And I completely agree with Fran. The problem is that we oftentimes forget the basic moral language and the moral categories of our Catholic faith. And because we are sometimes so overdetermined or overdefined in what we think by partisan obligation, and that's a habit that all of us Americans have. And when we Catholics have that habit, it's especially dangerous, because what we do is we lose that prophetic distance between faith and politics, such that we do one of two things. Either we begin to define our moral lives in terms of our partisan identification and our partisan loyalty, which is bad enough, or worse, we tend to collapse our faith into our political lives and to our partisan identity, such that we fail to know the difference between the two. And so it's a miracle to behold that the one party or the other happens to hold every single moral position that the Catholic Church holds. Well, of course, that's not true. But the problem is when we collapse that prophetic distance, that's what actually happens. And so we start to think that the Catholic position is the fill-in-the-blank party position, rather than the Catholic tradition having a prophetic distance, as you say, from both parties. And I completely agree with Fran. I don't see any way that I could vote for Joe Biden. I'm not sure that I could vote for Donald Trump either. And what we have to understand is that eliminating one because of, say, abortion doesn't necessarily mean that the other one gets our vote by default, just because he might espouse politics or policy positions that we call pro-life. We have to take the whole candidate into consideration and all the policies that he espouses, and we have to apply the fullness of Catholic faith to that analysis, not just one position.
That's right. Well, let's get into those party politics. Fran, in considering the role of Catholic leadership, Cardinal Gregory's recent diagnosis of President Biden as a cafeteria Catholic was welcomed by some and decried by others. How did you receive that comment?
Well, candidly, I'm sorry to sound so strong about this, but I mean, I think Biden is an apostate. I mean, I don't think he's a cafeteria Catholic. I think he abandoned that denomination a long time ago. I mean, a lot of Catholics, most of us as Catholics are cafeteria based because we choose, we pick and choose what we really want to emphasize in our lives. But I think the description that the Cardinal used is frankly rather inadequate, considering the person.
There you go. Well, that's one take. Ken, let's go to you on the language that we use as Catholics being more political than scriptural. You talk about that in your book, and you just mentioned it a few seconds ago. What does that mean then when God and country messages that a candidate is selling, like what former President Trump did with his new patriotic Bible? What message does that send? Is there any goodness in that? Is it completely terrible?
I think it's completely terrible, and this is why. It confuses what it means to be a patriot with what it means to be a Catholic Christian or a Christian in general, and that leads directly to the most grievous offense that we can commit, and that's the commission of idolatry. There's more than a whiff of idolatry in a God Bless America Bible, which includes things like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution or whatever else is in there, and that's not to say that those are bad documents. What it is to say is that we can't conflate those two things, because when we do that, it isn't the Catholic faith that emerges as predominant in our minds. It's the patriotism that emerges as predominant in our minds. And we hear a lot about nationalism in this election, and we hear all kinds of different definitions of that. Well, one definition of nationalism is to collapse religious faith into political identity such that the politics actually becomes an idol. And as I've said someplace else, I forget where now, it's no less an idolatrous to worship the nation or to collapse our faith into the politics of the nation than it is to bow to a golden calf. And I really worry that we Catholics tend to drift that way. And it makes me very nervous when I see Catholics just uncritically embracing certain political positions that are at best in tension with Catholic faith, because that does lead to this problem of idolatry, where we worship the flag or we worship the nation, or even if we don't do that overtly, we so collapse the distance between what it means to be a Catholic Christian and what it means to be an American that, again, we fail to see the difference between the two, and we wind up actually worshiping an idol when we think that we're worshiping God.
Well, that's certainly a problem. And Fran, I'll go to you for this. There is a moment in your book where you discuss the inverse, the influence politics has had on the church. Have we reached a point where our church is just too political?
Well, I think I don't know quite how to answer that. I mean, I think I don't think there's such a thing as a Catholic vote anymore. So I'm not sure that even if we wanted to be too political as an institution, we could have any influence. I mean, I think there's I really like what Ken just said, that kind of idolatrous attitude that most of us have, or a lot of us have, toward our loyalty to the state. Our oldest son went to West Point. And I remember when he was accepted, Sue and I had an enormous amount of pride in that. I simply wouldn't encourage anyone to go to the military academies now because I can't imagine why I would support the possibility of my son dying for certain things that I really fundamentally disagree with, and I find to be immoral. I mean, the country has gone in a very different direction from the kind of nation that I grew up in, and I'm much more ambivalent about endorsing its policies and just kind of an uncritical patriotism. I really, really like that comment about idolatry, because that's a constant temptation, and it has been throughout history.
Of course.
So we're strangers in a strange land, to borrow from Scripture, and we need to own that and behave like it. We need to support the government and support public leadership to the degree that we can, but we have to keep a significant critical distance from it. And that's, by the way Augustine would look at things when he was writing 1,600 years ago.
Well, it's a great example, and we're going to leave it right there. Gentlemen, thank you both for your analysis.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, thanks very much.